Welcome to the Champagne Society. We believe every mama deserves a break and some bubbly. And normalizing the struggle of the mama juggle reminds us we're always doing better than we think, and we're in this together. I'm your host, Gervase Kolmos, mom of three and certified mindset coach for moms. Each week, we'll be having unfiltered conversations with other inspiring entrepreneurial moms to hear their real life moments and lessons learned on what it actually takes to make it motherhood and instead of motherhood or. Pour yourself a drink and lock yourself in the bathroom because I have a potty mouth and I never have just one glass of wine. As my 4-year-old says,
let's talk about important things.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I've got Erin Berg here, and I'm so glad that you're joining me. Thank you so much for making time for this.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
It is my pleasure as well. Sorry, we both realized we had to shower and put on makeup for this, so I extra appreciate the effort put into that. We both have 3 kids, which is reason number 1 why I like you.
Feel you.
I stalked Erin on the Instagram. I don't know how many years ago, but you crossed my path on the gram. And then I was like, we have a lot of things in common and we serve similar audiences. We're both all about helping mothers thrive, giving women permission and support and community. So I am so excited for Erin to tell us a little bit about her family and also about your work in the world. Tell us about Totum.
Well, thanks. I'm excited to talk with you. It always feels like I'm talking to a friend. And I know we've had so many quasi business calls that turn into let's just be girlfriends, life, which I love. I have 3 kids. They are 8, 6, and 2, almost 3. I used to practice law. So I am an attorney, although I'm not on the nose practicing right now.
I love that about you, by the way. I love that casual. I'm just casually an attorney who has 3 kids. But anyway.
Sometimes I look at it and I'm like, why do I put that out there? And I think part of it is, as women, you can easily be dismissed. And I think sometimes I lead with it, especially kind of in the world we're in. And we're definitely in a patriarchy. And it just feels a little bit
claim that shit
in the beginning.
Make Moana, make way, out my way. I'm an attorney.
Yeah.
And it's not relevant to what I have to say next, but I just wanted to make sure you were listening.
Wanted to make sure you're listening. Yes. Yes. Although I will share something that I'm doing with that I'm super excited about.
Oh, good.
So 3 kids, I've done so many different things in life. After I was practicing law and I was doing music law in Nashville and then New York City, I got a job running a nonprofit in LA and moved there in 2008 to be the first executive director of a nonprofit for the Academy of Country Music. And that was super fun. I was working with all kind of country music artists and helping them launch their charitable efforts or take them to the next level. And from there, I worked in tech. I've done a lot of really cool things. But when I had our first baby, it was in 2012. I was really stunned by how interested everybody had been in my baby bump and even birth classes. I was in LA. There was a lot of support around birthing.
Yeah.
And then had the baby, got home, and was really shocked about what happened to me. I actually had in some ways, the reverse of postpartum depression. I really, really loved being a mom. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't expecting that because I was 33 when I became a mom for the first time. I was not the kind of person that grew up playing with baby dolls and babysitting, and definitely didn't have myself on some timeline of I need to have X babies by Y time. But then I had our baby and I loved it. And I felt really naturally inclined toward motherhood. And I felt a lot of instincts kick in. Things were really working. However, physically, the recovery was way more than I'd bargained for or expected. And also my relationship to my own ambition really changed. For quite a while, felt like
all of this. Me too.
Oh my gosh. Did not want to go back to work and really wanted to be with our baby, working outside the home, I should say. And there's so many phrases that you realize that's problematic. We're working at home. I did not want to go back into the office. I had a really high pressure role at the time. I was working for a startup that had gone from 5 of us to over 100, and we had gotten our Series B, and I was being asked to move into a C-level role. And so there was this ambitious side of me that had always been there, feeling like the good feminist in me needed to do this, or else what am I? Right. And then there was the part of me that felt like, I know deep inside, this isn't what I want to do at all. It wasn't even that deep. It was really clear to me. This is not what I want. I do not want to go back. I want to take a beat and be with our baby and focus on that. And it was so out of character for me that I think my husband didn't even hear it, not because he was dismissing me. It was just not
knew you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I went with our 2-month-old to visit my best friend who was in Toronto, Canada. And I came back, and my husband really gleefully in the car, picked me up at the LA airport, was like, so I found our nanny. I'm super excited. And I just dissolved into tears. Yeah. I didn't want a nanny. I didn't want to go back. But I did. And so it all went from there. But I had this moment. So bringing it back around to what I'm doing now, I'm the founder of Totum, which means whole in Latin. And we are devoted to helping modern mothers feel whole in motherhood. And it was really a solution to a problem that I faced, feeling like my body, my mind, my relationship to my ambition, my relationships themselves had a massive revolution. And it was 2012. We now have the term matrescence, where people are talking about this evolution.
Oh yeah. I saw that TikTok.
Yeah, exactly. And
really good.
Really good. And I'm glad there's vocabulary for it. But at the time there was really nothing. And I just felt, I think this is another area where you and I relate, when there's something that an area where I'm in pain and I get myself out of it, I feel like I want to go help other people do the same thing. And so that was really the intention behind Totum, which it took me like 5 more years to actually start it. I kept working for other people, and then I finally did it.
So then you went back to work after your first was like 3 months old. Is it like normal maternity leave?
Yeah, went back, 3-month-old,
And then your next was 2 years later, you had your next baby?
2 years, 3 months. Yeah.
So then you were working for 5 years since the first baby to the time you quit?
So so we had our first, then we had our second 2 years, 3 months after, but then I kept working, and it wasn't until right before I had our third that I stopped working. So it was in 2012, I had this notion that I wanted to start something that became called Totum later. And at the end of 2017, beginning of 2018, I launched it right after we had our third baby.
Yeah. So then was it like you were at work? I mean, thank you for sharing all of that, because I'm always curious how people stumble into entrepreneurship too, and especially mothers. And I had such a similar experience, except I lasted a lot shorter time before. I was just like crying every day, all the time, just like super depressed about going back to work. But I think that a lot of women that I cross paths with are having that experience where they're in the job and they're feeling not this, like what we call not this. I don't know what, but not this. Like every part of me wants to be somewhere else. Yep. And I know for me, I never wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. So that was really confusing for me when it was like, not this. I was like, well, then what? Like entrepreneurship, it honestly wasn't even, I don't know. I forgot it existed. And which is funny because my mom, I was just telling you, my mom was an entrepreneur. She had her own children's opera company. So it's not like it wasn't modeled to me, but I was convinced I was going to be this like sales exec, like for some tech company and like make big sales because I was super social. So I was like, this is a skill I can use, But back to my point is that I think a lot of women have that feeling, and then it takes a while for it to like grow and bubble up inside of them. And then I'm curious for you, by the time you did switch tracks, was it that the idea was so big and exciting that you knew it was time, or was it that the problem was so painful that you knew it was time?
Yeah, it was both. And thank you for that, because point of clarification is that I went back to that job. So I was working as the head of business development and business affairs at Indiegogo. And I went back to that job and I only lasted like about 6 months. And I was miserable. As same as you, I would cry in my driveway on the way there. I would cry after work. I was managing a team. I was miserable. My boobs were like bursting with milk and I would be too embarrassed to pump, too embarrassed to leave. And that's actually when I devised the recipe for the lactation cookie we sell, because I lost my milk supply. And so this message kept coming through to me that you actually can't do it all. You can be a good mom, or you can be this amazing woman at work, but it's not working. You can't do it all. And there's a lot to unpack there, but putting that aside for a second, I ended up leaving that specific role. I couldn't take it anymore. I left that specific role. It was really tearful and really difficult for me to leave because there was a lot that I had created there and a lot that I had, really just put on the tracks. Like I was in charge of our new brand book and the DNA, and then like finding the head of communications to put that forward. And I knew I'm going to leave and whoever takes over is going to want to put their own stamp on it. So it felt like I was flushing a lot of what I'd created. To be able to listen to myself. And I actually stopped working fully and was a full-time mom for only about 3 months. And then an opportunity came to me to go to WME, which is one of the top 2 talent and media agencies in the world. So they represent like tons of talent, like everybody from Hugh Jackman to The Rock to massive media companies. So I went there and they wanted somebody to, teach them about crowdfunding. And because I'd been early in at Indiegogo, I knew all about crowdfunding. So I went and I was actually really strong in my boundaries. And I said, I will do this 20 hours a week. I will work Tuesday through Thursday. And I still want to make 6 figures, like the strong 6-figure number that I put forward. And they went for it. And I mean, they're agents. And I was like, oh, I'm negotiating with that. And they went for it. And I think it was because the knowledge that I had was specialized and they didn't know that world. And it actually, aside from running Totum, that was the best role for me because the boundaries were so clear. While I was there, I had our second baby. And then I actually left and worked full-time somewhere else because they were really heavily recruiting me. Story sounded really good. And I lost myself. Again, big time. And it was actually, and I know you're a coach, so I wanted to share this. It was actually when I was standing in our son and daughter's preschool at the time, I was standing in line waiting to go into their little holiday show. And the woman behind me, we started having this great conversation. She was asking me about work and about life. And I'm really transparent, open book. And I told her, I was like, to be honest with you, I feel like I'm being dragged behind the bus of my life. I have what people probably see is like, oh, this great job. And she's always dressed so nicely when she comes to drop off. But I was miserable. I wasn't leading my life. Circumstances were leading me. And I was aware enough to know that, which actually in some ways made it hurt more. And she was like, this is interesting. You're sharing this because I am an executive coach for ambitious mothers. And I was like, what about that? Yes. Her name's Sarah Gibbons. And so I actually enrolled in work with her. And she was the person who helped me understand things like what my limiting beliefs were and what were my real values, and to write down my values and define them for myself and start to reframe what my limiting beliefs were and to think in terms of possibility. And that's when I got really clear on what I wanted to create and what I needed to create it. And that's when I finally had the guts to launch Totum, only with support of another woman.
Love that. That I like to believe that the universe moves around helpers. I feel like I always get what I need when I really need it, but not when I'm desperately clutching for it, but when I'm open. And for me, when I quit my job, I said to myself, I'm going to say yes to things that feel creative and exciting. Cause I was like, I came from theater school. I was supposed to be an actor. I was singing, tap dancing and singing.
I can see that for you.
Yeah. For 2 years. And then I quit that and then came here. But so it's just weird when you find yourself where you're like, wait, I'm not leading my life, the way, like aligned with who I am. And so when I quit my job, one of the vows I made to myself was I'm going to do shit that feels fun, just because it feels fun, not because it, like checks a box or looks whatever. And I went to a writing workshop because I always loved writing and it just felt like a real outlet for me. And I sat next to a life coach and that's literally how I thought to even be a life coach. I just like quit my job and had no idea. And then I was at this workshop literally the day after my last day of work. And this woman was like, I'm a life coach. And she's like telling me what she did. And I was like, my whole body, I had like goosebumps. It was like, ding, ding, ding. And I was like, whoa. So I do love that idea that like what you need when you are ready to receive it will just like the universe will just move shit around and it'll just land in your lap, I
love that. Yeah. I need to live in that more. I find that because I am such a, I've always been a striver and then I try to pretend that I'm not, and I just am, it like comes back and bites me in the butt. And it's hard when you're that kind of person to really be like, okay, am I doing this and I'm not holding on tight and that's a sort of striving, or am I really letting go of it, know?
Well, totally. That's like, I love playing in that place. And what I do, just tell you, is like, I need proof. And I think a lot of women need proof of this works for me. Like examples of when I haven't been striving or trying so hard or, doing things for external validation and it worked out. And then it helps you. It's like, I call it like a template, like a template that you put on. And so whenever you're like, oh, in this, like in business, I'm really good at just, it all works out. But in relationships, I'm clutching and controlling. You're like, okay, well, how am I in business? What is the feeling? What are the thoughts I think before something happens? How can I apply that template to this scenario in relationship?
I love that.
Yeah. Just like a little thing. Cause that
comes up all the time.
But I'm back to you. But it's interesting too, hearing your story, because I didn't realize you hopped so much from like,
I tried them all. I was a full-time mom. I was a full-time working mom. I was a part-time working mom, and I've been an entrepreneur. I've tried them all. And I believe right now that in most companies, they have really not address the truth of what it is to be a working parent, woman or man.
Yeah.
And they are not supportive. And I think that's why we see many women trying on entrepreneurship. And it's tricky because in some ways it's fantastic for women. And in others, you lose a lot of support structure and you lose a lot of, there's no paid leave. And there is sort of a requirement to hustle to some degree that is not, it's not the healthiest. Whereas if you're, when I was in a work environment and I knew that I had healthcare covered and I knew I had this great salary coming in and I knew I had a team, you're going to have some days where you're off and some when you're on. And I think what's tough as an entrepreneur is it's really all you. And even when you have a team, you're constantly thinking, okay, how do I square the expenses of a team with the revenue we need to bring in? I don't know what the perfect solve is, except that I will share that I got really into reading like the OG feminists after watching Mrs. America on Hulu.
Oh my gosh, that show, I actually had to take a break from that show because it was like giving me anxiety because I was like, what are they doing to her? Like what?
I know.
For those of you who don't know, would you like give a little backstory of Mrs. America?
Yeah. So Mrs. America is about what's considered the first or second wave of feminism, however you think about it. And it's Shirley Chisholm and Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan. And they are really working to enact
the Equal Rights Amendment.
Yeah, the Equal Rights Amendment. And there's a character in there who is, a real life character who it's very hypocritical because she's working full time to come against the ERA. Mm-hmm. And she's saying that women need to stay in the home for all these reasons, but she's not staying in the home. And so you look at it, and one of the things that's frustrating is that we haven't made much progress And that was something that made me want to go back and read the books that these women wrote.
Yeah.
In particular, I started rereading The Feminine Mystique, and then I started listening to it on Audible when I go on walks. And one thing that Betty Friedan said in an updated and revised version that she put out in like the late 90s is that the next frontier of feminism will happen within the corporate structure, because until companies realize that both women and men who have children at home need to work around 30-hour work weeks, because children are not a fiction. They go to school or daycare and they come home, and somebody's got to be there. And if we don't have government subsidized daycare, then corporations need to realize that working parents, number one, can get everything they need to get done within a 30-hour working week. And they need it for there to be equality at home. And so that's something that I've been thinking about a lot. And I think what's interesting from COVID, and just one of kind of the blessings of 2020, is we've given up the fiction that if you don't see the kids, they're not there. You know, that's how I always felt going into an office. They didn't see my kids. So was I really a mom? No, not if they were going to send me to New York and tell me about it at 7 p.m. the night before. And I would go. So it was always incumbent upon me as a working parent to draw that line. And then you're penalized for drawing that line. That's the way it works right now. So I'm really curious to see what changes can be made within the corporate structure to support equality at home.
Yeah. And I totally agree with all of that. And I do think there's a bit of this identity thing happening for, especially, I can't speak for fathers, but I know for me and for like women that I work with, when you come from the corporate world, it's true. It's like you have this identity. It's like when you hang out with your single girlfriends, but your kids are at home and, you know, you're like a hot mess trying to get to that girls' night, and they, you know, they're not. And you don't want to come with this attitude of like, sorry, I'm late, but you have no idea what it took me to get out of the house, you know? So you have to like work twice as hard to like show up and be normal. And then you have to work 3 times as hard to like stay up really late, because you know you're going to wake up at 6. And when you wake up at 6, it's like this relentless pace. And so I think, I know when I was in the corporate world, even though it was only for 6 months after my daughter was born, it's like when you show up to that environment, you're having to pretend, you know, you're like having to put on this identity of like, I'm still me. I'm still like, I still got it. I can hustle. And it's like, yeah, you can, but that's why I asked you, did you quit because you were inspired by entrepreneurship, or did you quit because the problem was so painful? Because I just think like all things in life, it's just a matter of like, when's the bridge going to break? Because like you can only hold so much before that way of being, of like pretending and like trying to keep up and, you know, proving that you are just as good, or that you are somebody that you were, you know, 5 years ago before you had kids, before it catches up with you and like the dam breaks.
It's 100% true. And I think, you know, you're taking me back to that moment when I was in the last place that I worked in a corporation before I left. And I remember talking with women there, and they would say things like, you're so inspiring. Like you're doing this as a mom, and you're so inspiring. And I would think, wow, what a ruse. The fact that, you know, on one hand, it was a nice compliment. And I mean, the women saying that I think so highly of still, and it meant a lot to me. And I felt like such an imposter. And that's what I shared with Sarah that day, is that like these younger women who don't have kids yet are saying that I'm this inspiring leader because they know to some degree I'm juggling it. But I feel like such an imposter because I'm actually struggling. The dam was breaking. And the fact that I was keeping up this fiction that everything was fine, I felt like, who is that serving? That's actually not serving corporate change, because it seems like if only you're smart enough or capable enough, you'll just be the inspiring person that makes it all work. And I wasn't making it work, you know? It's tricky. It's tricky. So I think for me, it was a combination of, yes, the dam breaking, and also being really inspired to start something from the standpoint of like a servant leadership that really came together.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. So where are you now? Like now we're recording this in Oh my God. I was like, what month is it?
I know. Isn't that weird? That happens to me all the time.
When you leave the corporate world, you forget what day it is. Heads up. Okay. So we're in November 2020, post-election. So where have you landed now, knowing obviously like nothing is permanent, but like, what's it feeling like? What does your role feel like? Do you feel like you're more full-time momming or half and half, or what does it look like?
Yeah. So at this point, so our youngest is going to be 3 this week. At this point, he was supposed to be in preschool, but we opted to send our oldest kids to school because they need it. It's like actual school, you know, they're in first and kindergarten.
Yeah.
But for preschool, it was a tough call. I mean, in the end of the day, we decided that he didn't need to be in preschool, so he's still at home. And my husband and I were doing this juggle that I think everybody has been doing, and talk about a fiction in 2020 of like, well, you take the kids and then I'll take the kids and we'll pretend we can make it work that way. And neither one of us were feeling like we were showing up the way we wanted to at work or at home. And so we finally got support at least 3 days a week from somebody for our third.
Ironic timing.
Yeah, it's great. So you can see it's all working perfectly. And so we now have that in place, and that's given me the ability to know within certain bounds, like I work between drop off and pickup. And I leave here for pickup at 2:30. And, you know, there are exceptions, or sometimes I need to work on things after that. But if I do, I really try to have that be after bedtime or early morning, because it's really important to me to be fully on with my kids from the time they get home from school until they're in bed. And I like it. I like to make dinner and I like to sit and do homework with them. And I enjoy that. I don't want to give that up. Yeah. So I'm doing a balance right now. So
then when your kids come home, does that mean like you put the phone away? Are you one of those people? Because people always want to know this, like, what's your schedule? How do you blah, blah, blah? And I am not a real good, like, I don't thrive. My personality and human design type, it's not about schedule and routine. It's about fluidity. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like I'm talking to somebody who has a schedule. So what does that look like for you? Is it like you put your phone away and then you pick it back up? Are you working at night, or is it then you're with your husband at night? Like, tell me.
Yeah. So I relate actually to the fluidity, but I've learned that I have to have somewhat of a schedule right now. So I know that I basically have blocked from 8 o'clock. I drop my kids off at like 7:45. So from 8 o'clock until 2:30, those are my working hours. So if I have to schedule a meeting or a podcast or whatever it is I'm doing, I have to write something, I'm doing it between those hours. Mm-hmm. And then I don't put my phone completely away, but I'm not engaged with it. I'm really engaged with my kids from the time I pick them up and they come home. And so it normally looks like, do homework, play with them a little bit. And then it feels like it always is suddenly dinner time. So that I'm making dinner. We sit down and eat about 5:15, and then it's bath time and shows and cuddling and bedtime. So I do have a schedule with the kids. And we also, I don't want this to derail everything, but we had an extra crappy year in 2020 because our oldest was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes out of nowhere. We have no family history. And for anybody that doesn't know and is not familiar with it, you make hundreds of decisions a day. Like one of the things I was doing before we hopped up on here was that I was texting with his school nurse and looking at an app that shows his blood sugar and trying to figure out how we need to treat him. And so that has really tied me to my phone and made us even more mindful of schedule and routine than we ever had to be before.
Wow. I thought when you have diabetes, you take a medication maybe like twice a day, and no.
So he has type 1, which is autoimmune. So it's not brought on by lifestyle in any way. It's an autoimmune condition there's apparently a genetic marker that you have, and then some event kicks it off. So it could be environmental, but most times it's a virus. Most parents of kids with diabetes will say like, oh yeah, he had that cold, or she had that hand, foot, and mouth, or whatever. And then your immune system, as it's attacking the virus, starts attacking your pancreas and attacks the cells that make insulin. So you no longer make insulin at all when you have type 1. And so anytime you eat, you have to have a dose of insulin. So poor guy has to have 3 to 4 shots a day that we or the school nurse have to administer, because insulin is what carries the sugar and carbohydrates to our cells to make them function, and he no longer has it. So it's a dance of looking at where his blood sugar is, doing a calculation, giving him the dose that he needs, and also making sure that what he eats is not going to have a really tough impact on his metabolism. Some people with type 1 diabetes just eat whatever they want, and they, have a lot of insulin to carry it. I got into a really nerdy space with this and did a lot of research, and foods with a low glycemic index really make a massive difference in treatment. And so that's how we're feeding him. And he's been amazing. He's only 8 and he's totally on board. So yeah, it's a lot, but it's forced us all into a lot of routine. I had amazing boundaries with my phone before. I used to put my phone, charge it in the bathroom, and then go to bed. I can't do that anymore because we get alerts all night. Alarms go off if he has low blood sugar or high, and we have to treat him all night. It's like unwanted postpartum,
Wow.
Yeah.
I know that. And I can't imagine how much like energetic space that takes up, like I'm always telling my husband, this, but it's not like official, but we are probably moving. And so we are getting our house ready to list, like with a week turnaround time, which isn't impossible, but there was like a lot of little things we had to do. And he was responsible for mow the lawn, trim trim hedges? I don't know, whatever you trim shrubbery wise, he was doing that, paint this thing. And I was responsible for declutter and organize. And I was like, how much I wish my job was linear and I just had to paint a wall, and I'm in the kitchen, looking around. There's just crap everywhere. And it's declutter and make this look very sparse. And I was like,
I know. So stressful.
It took up so much,
right? So many
mental
decisions.
Bandwidth that I was like, okay, I had to I can't just, and this kind of segues. It's I cannot just force myself to sit down and work just because it's a work day, or, declutter because I said I was going to declutter. I really try to work with something called energetic time management, which is doing things that give me a boost of energy. And then that energy, I ride that wave. And then that carries me into I'll clean the house from 6 to 6:40 while the kids are playing around my feet one night randomly. And I will have cleaned 3 bedrooms and scrubbed a toilet. And I'm like, that was really weird.
I relate to you so much.
Yeah, but it's super easy and it's super quick. And I'm just always following those waves of energy. So I'm curious for you, what gives you energy these days?
So as you were saying that, I was thinking about how during quarantine, I made a habit of running in the morning, even though I haven't been a runner for a long time, because of what I noticed with my energy. Yeah. I would notice on the days that I went out and ran, I would come home and have I would just get really unblocked with Totum. Yeah. I mean, when you're an entrepreneur and you're not doing something that's linear. And my husband all the time is like, why don't you just go to practicing law and bill people for hours? It's very boom, boom. Totum is not that way. It evolves all the time. We have to pivot all the time. And so many times I would notice that I would run and something that had seemed so complicated would unblock, and I would go into the house and just jam through things that I had been blocked on. And so instead of just sort of waiting for that wave, because I can't afford to do that right now, I created that wave. And I have started to think about, without knowing this terminology, which I love the vocabulary around that. Thank you. I've created those waves by noticing what are things that put me in that place. Running does, showering does, I always have to have time on the weekends. I really don't like working on the weekends. And it's back to the way in which you're describing yourself. Sure, time may open up where I'm suddenly like, ooh, I can go in and write that copy. I'm in the mood to write copy, but I don't want to have a structure and an expectation that I like owe anything over a weekend, because I am huge on connection. And so I feel our weekends are a huge time for connecting back into my husband, connecting back into the kids, and play. So,
you know what this is reminding me of? We just watched, that movie Under the Tuscan Sun. It like popped up on Netflix, and I actually watched it twice in like 3 days, because I watched it and then I had like a girls' weekend, and then they were like, let's watch it. So, but there's this character there who lives in Italy. She's been there for a long time, and she's just like very free and like sensual and living her best life. And she quotes this guy, I actually wrote it down, but something like, you have to live spherically in every direction. You have to live a life spherically in every direction for it to feel full, or something like that. And I remember hearing that and being like, whoa, wait a minute, say that again for the people in the back, because what happens, especially, well, first of all, I became an entrepreneur partly because of freedom. So if I feel like I have to do blah, 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 it's like, what's the fucking point? I might as well just like go back to this other job I hated, because I hate feeling restricted. But also for this mentality, I think of all mothers, working entrepreneurs, full-time, of like, here's my purpose on this earth. Be productive. I can either be productive by getting skinny. That's productive. I ran today, right? Which I'm not saying was you, but I mean in general. Or I can be productive because I'm at work. I'm making money. That's productive. Or I'm, taking care of my kids. Maybe sometimes that's debatable. A lot of people don't feel like that's productive, but I'm like, this is what I did today. Right. But so when you are resting or playing or, like getting unstuck or clearing your head or being creative, like that's not productive. And so it's like this idea of like, you're not living spherically. You're just like living like one dimensionally, and humans aren't meant to be that way. And so then it gets backed up. Everything gets backed up, like emotionally, energetically, physically, you just start to feel worse and worse and worse. And so I am really interested in this idea of, am I living spherically this week? Like, okay, obviously I get a lot of stuff done. Like, obviously I would like to sell my house, so I'm going to do what I need to do. And I know my timeline, but like, I don't know, the other day, this was actually a couple weeks ago, I told my husband in bed, I was like, I feel like a little bored. Like I need to do something creative. And he was like, well, like, what if you take a dance class? Or, it was really cute. And I was like, no, actually, I think I'm going to start playing the piano again. And he was like, nice. And we have this piano from my childhood. I used to play really well because my mother was like this German disciplinarian. And, I learned how to play and practiced every day at 5 a.m. And so the fun was kind of like sucked out of it. And so I hated it. And I always was like, I want to have a house where music is a joy. It's like a pleasure. It's like this idea of pleasure, maybe more than creativity even. Mm-hmm. And so the last few weeks, I've just been, whenever I'm super stressed, I'm like, oh, because I've only done 2 things this week. I've either been productive as a parent and like kept my 3 kids alive, or I've been productive in my job. And then I'll just like go and sit and play the piano. And it makes me just feel more whole.
I love that.
It makes me feel more totem.
I love that. Well, and that's why, so many podcasts and interviews and articles, people ask so often, how do you achieve balance? And I don't believe in balance. Yeah. I think that's where you can get really hung up and really into shame and really into lack. If you are trying to live whole, and I love that about what you said, living spherically, that's another way to put it. And I think it's beautiful too, because each of us gets to decide what makes us whole. Yeah. We all come with our own set of values and a sense of purpose and things that we want to learn and gifts that we want to share. And so being able to decide, and by the way, within each of us, it shifts and changes, just like, and that's what I was thinking about in new motherhood. It was a lot of thinking about the adjustment and sort of this assimilation. And our culture loves to talk about like bouncing back or becoming this? And what if it's just assimilating? What if it's taking all that you knew of yourself before and all that you're learning now and defining the way in which you want to live and making sure you feel whole? And, and so when I am feeling good and things are working, it's because there's this sense of wholeness. And so for me, I'm clear on my values, and connection is number one. And so I make a point every Monday and Friday, I work out with like my favorite person here in town. And I don't think about, and it's back to the whole striving thing. I don't worry, like, is that a productive use of my time? Of course it is. It helps. I feel whole. I feel connected. I feel alive. I feel joy. And that impacts everything else.
Yeah, I love that. And I just think a lot of women need permission. Like, I think it's good for anybody to hear another person say, like, of course it's productive to work out with my friend because you're doing it for the right reasons. You're doing it because you love your body and you love your life and you love this person versus like, I hate my body, so I need to grind it out and, abuse it. So I love that example. And it actually made me think of something you said. I'm like taking notes over here so I don't forget, because there's so many things. I'm like, I want we could talk about all these things. But you did say earlier, you were saying something like, I realized I couldn't do it all. And which I hear a lot. And I used to like, my favorite tagline used to be like, you can have it all. And I think I wasn't like brave enough to back that up at the time. Like now I really do think you can have it all, because the thing that I realized, even when you were talking, it's like, you couldn't do it all, but you also needed permission to like strip away the shit that you were doing that you already knew you didn't want to be doing. Yeah. So it's like, you can't belong to everybody and yourself at the same time. Like,
you can have your all. You can have it all.
Right. Yeah. Which I know, like, that's not what you said, but it just reminds me of like this idea that women are trying to keep up with like this idea of balance as doing it all, instead of being like, no, balance. Like you said, it's like, let's strip away all the stuff that's not us anymore. And then like realign into like, what are the things we know we want to be doing? What are the things we know that our intuition or, our heart is like, yes, this makes me feel whole. This makes me feel so good. Do more of this. And I think a lot of it is just giving ourselves permission to do it. To drop the thing we don't want to do and then pick up the thing we do want to do and not feel like we have to justify that. It's like, it's like, it doesn't matter if it checks like the patriarchy's box of productivity, like working out with my friend, even if I'm gaining weight while I do it, that it's not about being super hot and sexy for you, like for you, the external you. It's about me feeling good and making that enough of a reason.
100%. And I think that that's it. Like where you landed there too, because so much of quote unquote it for women and mothers has become caregiving for everybody else. Yeah. And so part of defining it is what? It's being the person that's always there for the doctor's appointment, being the person that cleans the house, being the one that holds the, mental and emotional load of all the schedules and the doctor's appointments and the food and all of it. There's no reason. I mean, it's parenting. It doesn't all have to be mothering. And I think it feels really revolutionary to think that way. And it's interesting because I have, some women that I worked with, actually the last company I worked, who were quite a bit younger. There were a lot of like 23-year-olds there who are aging up a little bit, and they're having their first kids, and their husbands think really differently. And I heard a story recently where one of my former colleagues, who's a guy, was like, I was with my father-in-law and he was sort of making fun of me for changing a diaper. And it was just culture shock. Like he said, I would never question changing a diaper. And so I think I think there's a lot of hope where we're really shattering this idea that women are supposed to be martyrs, and especially mothers are supposed to be martyrs. But I find that I hold a lot of these myths inside, that I'm not doing a good job if I'm not doing it all. What does it mean if I'm not doing it all? Do I really want to let go of it? Maybe I like being like the chief operating officer at home. And I think with that, that's worth examining. Like, maybe those are the things. And I, by the way, I am the person that does want to be there at the doctor's appointments. I do want to hold my kids' hands through a doctor's appointment. And one of my favorite authors in like kind of the most modern wave of feminism, as I see it, is Eve Rodsky, who wrote Fair Play. And she and I have become friends. And she talks a lot about how time is time. And we say that time is money. And we think that men's time is finite and women's time is infinite. And it's just simply not true. And so I think it's really up to us to kind of crack these myths that we have about what it means to be doing it all and what it means to get help and to get support and allow ourselves to live in a way that's more whole and to ask for what we need.
Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up because I literally forgot that that's what made me want to interview you I always knew I was going to interview you, but I forgot. I was like, let's talk about mom guilt because it's one of those myths. And you had like did some post about it on Instagram. And I just remember like reading it and relating to it so much and being like, this is a universal white elephant. And it's not even like, I think most of us are carrying it around, not even ashamed. We're just like, well, of course, of course I should feel embarrassed if I have a nanny. Like, of course I'm the CEO. So can you talk a little bit more about specifically mom guilt and how you've been experiencing it? Or if you feel like you're on the other side of it, like, where are you at with that?
No, for sure. So I don't know if you relate to this, but when I have a problem with something like an internal or like emotional problem with something, I'm very impatient with myself about it. So I feel like, oh, you already felt the mom guilt thing a long time ago. So be done with that. Yeah. Like you get bored of yourself, but sometimes I get bored of it before I've really healed. And that's what happened to me with the whole mom guilt thing. And a good friend of mine, we were doing an event together. I guess it's been almost 2 years ago. And she was supposed to talk on mom guilt. And she was like, but I don't go into an office, so I don't have mom guilt. And I was like, so interesting that that's how you define it, that like mom guilt is only for people who leave their kids during the day to go into an office, because I see mom guilt as ambivalence. I see it as a thing that keeps me from deciding that what I want is okay.
Yes.
Because I have to take care of other people. And it shows up for me. It showed up in such a clear way during this pandemic because my husband has, for a large part of it, has not been going. He's a veterinarian. To make a long story short, he got COVID at work. They were not taking precautions. He ended up being fine, but it was a whole drama. And he's now launching his own business. But between him being like fully engaged as a vet for somebody else and the business opening, he is doing house call work. And so he's here a good deal. And still, I feel like I should be the one. If I see him playing with our toddler, I'm like, ugh, why am I sitting in here writing this article? I'm choosing not to be with my child. And there's this whole guilt around that. And that's one thing that I hear a lot of entrepreneurs talk about is it's one thing if some employer, like this draconian employer in your mind is like making you go into the office versus when you're choosing to build something of your own, there's a lot more guilt around it. So I just had to realize how it was showing up for me and how it was keeping me from being as decisive as I need to be. And I've learned a lot about decision-making and how it's really hard to be successful at anything if you don't decide to be successful at it. So that's how it's shown up for me. And that's what I still need to crack open. So I'm bored of it with me and I haven't totally worked through it.
I totally relate to that. Like when I be working with my coach and then something comes up, I'm like, are you like, again? We literally have been doing this for years. Come on. But I think I was just talking about this to somebody, how it's like, I think of it as like a Nintendo game or whatever, or Nintendo is so 90s, but whatever the kids are playing these days. And it's like,
no Nintendo. Now it's the Nintendo Switch. So you're fine.
Keep me cool and relevant, please. It's like beating the next level. It's like, maybe it's still the same monster, but you're getting better. Right. But now it's like showing up in a more advanced, way. And so to challenge you to really decide like, no, we're not doing this. Like, I'm not available for this. So yeah, I love that. And also I think it's super relatable for just anyone. And it just reminds me that the awareness of it tends to be like the greatest defense against it, like when it rears its, like for me, it looks more like self-judgment, and I can like really get into a spiral about anything. And then I'm like, oh, I'm just like being really hard on myself. Oh, I'm judging myself for X, Y, and Z. And then as soon as I feel like I've stepped into the awareness of it, I feel so much less like shame because of it. It's right. It's freeing to then do that. And then, the whatever you work on with a professional on the steps that come after. Right. So it's like, it's so cool to hear that validated, because I think so many people are just even scared to name it, like, no, I don't feel guilty. Or like, no, it's fine. The reason my husband doesn't play with the kids all the time is because I love playing with the kids all the time. And, and then it builds up resentment, and then it's just a bad situation. So
100%. Well, and I've noticed that too. We started off talking about moving. I moved from LA to the South, and I've noticed there really is culturally a thing here in the South where people want you to think that it's all fine. Their marriages are fine. Everything with the kids is fine. Like it's this sort of need to be positive all the time. And while I think it's important to come to a place of positivity, I'm not into a pretense that we live there all the time. Yeah.
It's a Band-Aid anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, don't air your dirty laundry. That's why I am a horror to many people, but also a delight to others. So it's all good. You find your people either way because of the internet.
The whole like Brene Brown, that shame can't
withstand being spoken.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as it's spoken, it can't withstand it. So
true. And also I would even challenge the Southern stereotype is, when I was doing, live Champagne Society events, and they were always like well attended. Right. But I remember one time there was this woman who came, who had reached out to me on Instagram and was having, was going through like the normal new mama, like cluster of balancing it and whatever. And I was like, I would love to gift you a ticket to this event. Like, I don't have an agenda here. I literally just want to set mothers free. Like, that is what I want to do. So like, it's yours if you want it. And she didn't come that time. She didn't feel like she could ask for it from her partner and like leave her babies and all of that stuff. But she did come like 6 months later. And she said to me, a lot of women are embarrassed or like feel too vulnerable and embarrassed to be seen at one of these events. Wow. And she was clearly like a little tipsy and having the best time ever. She had come with her girlfriends. And I remember like hearing that, and I was like, it's so sad for them, right? Like, you're having a good time, right? I'm not laying in bed thinking about the women that are like, oh my God, you don't air your dirty laundry. I am thinking about like the 50 women who were here tonight who feel free and alive and like connected to other women because of the vulnerability and the truth for possibly the first time since having kids, So I do think that there is, she did show up, for example, and like, she's like a Southern woman. I think they want it, but it is that permission piece of like creating communities where they feel safe to do so and just keep showing up and reminding them like other people are here. Like, we're having a good time. It's totally fine if this isn't your jam, but if it is, like, it's you not making the choice to be here, And
I think that's one thing too that I relate to about you is just going first, just saying it first, not knowing how it's going to land, not knowing if it's going to work out, but saying it. And there's a lot of power in that. It frees people up to be like, whoa, she went ahead and said it. And even if they're not saying it too, it kind of rejiggers things and helps people feel that it's okay to not have it all figured out
together. Yeah. You can have it all, but you might not have it all together. Maybe that should be my new tagline.
There you go. I like that. That.
All right. Well, we are running out of time. So I love to ask every guest, if you could go back in time and visit yourself right before you brought your first baby into this world and became a mother, knowing everything you know now, having amassed all of this amazing wisdom that you obviously have, what advice would you give yourself?
Okay. So a super specific thing came to mind, which is focus more on learning how to push during delivery.
Yes. That's such good advice. That is such good advice.
Pour up from the floor up, because I didn't know how to push, even though the rest went really well. I would tell her that. God bless that poor girl.
Yeah, that's literally why I moved from a hospital to a birth center for my second child. And then the second time when I pushed, they like coached me. The first time they were like, all right, push. And I remember being like, what does that mean? Like, how? I
know.
Like
I had done all this work around, unmedicated labor and all of that work out. And then I don't know, I just think I wasn't paying attention to the pushing part. I thought that would come naturally. And had an unexpected episiotomy because it was like, you're too tight, nothing's happening. And it was real painful.
I am so sorry for your trauma. But also great advice for everyone listening. Okay.
And then if you didn't learn how to push, get a pelvic floor specialist.
Yes. And if you want to be taught or coached through pushing the first time, get a doula or go to like a birth center that has midwives, because the midwives, they were like, okay, push, here's how. And it was amazing. It like made perfectly. They were like, curl up around your baby and like, you feel here, like push into the, like really life-changing experience. So other things. Okay. Amazing. How can people keep in touch with you and Totum and support the work that you are doing in the world? Because I'm sure that many people will want to.
Awesome. So we are at Totum Women on Instagram, and it's TOTUM women, plural, on Instagram, and at totumwomen.com.
Yay. Last thing, I just want to acknowledge you, Erin, for being such a beautiful, shining example of a mom who is like doing the dance of the juggle so heroically without even knowing it. Like, I think that you are really a trailblazer, and those women who were below you, like younger than you in corporate, are like kissing the ground you walk on right now, probably because you are paving the way and you are also going first. And it's hard to go first, especially when you got 3 and you're like, can somebody else help me? Do I have to do all the things? So I mean, I really want to acknowledge you for being a community builder, and I'm so happy to know you.
Well, I appreciate it. I feel the same about you. We know it's not easy. So thank you for being so supportive.
Okay. I'll see you later.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Isn't Erin just so cool? I think she's doing such important work in the world for mamas, and we need it the most. Make sure you go follow her on Instagram. It's at Totum Women. That's TOTUMWOMEN on Instagram, and check out her website, totumwomen.com. And if you are pregnant or know anybody who's breastfeeding, try those lactation cookies on our website. They are delicious. Support other moms doing awesome work. And I share all my coachable moments over on the gram at Gervase Kolmos, my full name, GervaseKolmos. So follow along for more real talk on how to have it all as a mama and a woman. And shout out to our sponsor for this podcast, Kids Garden, owned by a Charleston mama of 2, Marin Anderson. Kids Garden is special. That's all. They're just special. I've loved using them and supporting her. They're an eco-friendly creative arts learning center, offering your family peace of mind in all they do. They've got you with flexible childcare through all seasons of your family's growth. You can count on them for both spontaneity and stability. So that's been really good for me because I need spontaneity as like a juggling entrepreneur, but I know women who have used them for full-time childcare and loved it. They've got locations in Mount Pleasant and Charleston, South Carolina, Steamboat Springs, Colorado, Asheville, North Carolina, and in 2021, another one opening in Houston, Texas. That is a mama with a real juggle happening. Check them out at kidsplaygarden.com and give yourself peace of mind in one of the biggest challenges for any mother, whether you're a working mom, entrepreneur, stay-at-home mom. Childcare is so tough to figure out. So check them out. You will love it. And if you like this podcast, which I hope you did, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes because that's super important to helping other mamas find it. So thanks, guys. Till next time.